Greetings and salutations, nerds. You're listening to Praying for Superpowers.
Podcast about the deeper meanings, messages, and intricacies hidden within nerd culture. I'm Peter Jordahl.
And I'm Trevor Sharon, and today we're talking about V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic.
Ars Travars.
This is honestly one of my favorite trilogies.
Yes.
Because it feels so comfortable. Like, the first book could have been its own book. The second book built off of the first one really well, but was its own story. The third one did the same thing and then ended everything in a really nice way. Like, it was really satisfying the way it ended.
And it's done.
And it's done.
You don't have to wait for the next one.
Yeah.
So that just is cherry on top of the whipped cream that
Totally.
the story is.
And I've been following V.E. Schwab on Twitter for the past couple months, and she's been really fun to follow because she seems like such a normal person.
Yeah.
Which you don't... I think it's hard when you find some amount of fame to still feel real and just normal.
Yeah.
You have the people who get these big heads, and from what she has written, she totally deserves to have a big head because it's brilliant.
It is brilliant. We missed her. She was in Denver a couple months ago for a book signing. We missed that.
That's okay. She'll come on the show eventually.
Eventually, Victoria. We see you. So the basics of this story is it starts in London. Okay, London, England, our world. What, 1819? 1819
is
okay.
when the first book starts.
Okay, so it happens in our world, but
it kind of takes this form of 4 different Londons that all have the same location but different planes, kind of. And there's this magic that is flown out of Black London into the other layers of London,
which are white, red, and gray.
Yep. And gray is our London. King George III is the King of London in the first book, which is accurate historically. There are mentions of different poets and different streets that existed back then. One thing I do really appreciate about this series is I think a lot of writers have a tendency, and for better or worse, to go back to a time of like Victorian ages and use their language of the these and thous. And she doesn't do that. Also, I thought it was really interesting that V.E. Schwab's name is Victoria Elizabeth.
2 queens.
2 queens in London, and just I thought that was really interesting.
So the story follows kind of 2 main characters. The main character is Kell.
Yep.
And that it's K-L, there's no E, it's just Kell. And he is a prince in Red London.
Mm-hmm.
And he can use his magic. He's the only one with this magic, except for one other character, who can travel between the Londons. And so he goes from London to London, and his job is to carry letters from the king of each London to the king of each London. And only the king in Grey London knows about it, right? The prime minister doesn't know, the queen doesn't know, just the king knows. And so it's really interesting to see this character Kell as a young magician.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have anyone to train him because he's the only one in Red London.
A dying race of Antari, who are this very special kind of magic user. The different, wherever you are in the Londons, kind of talks about how you can use the magic. And I really like that in this story, magic is its own character. Which you don't see often, like even in a lot of really good epic fantasy novels, the magic has personality, but I wouldn't call it its own character.
Or the magic is sentient,
right? In
a lot of ways in these books, and the way Kell is marked, something that we see in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
This marked by magic, and one of his eyes is dark black, just black all the way through. Like the Parchment in the Stormlight Archive by Sanderson, like the demons are portrayed in the TV show Supernatural. The dark eye is darkness. Yep. It's evil.
And in the Schwab books, black represents an unbalance between magic, and so magic needs balance. This concept that we see pretty often. The other main character is Delilah Bard, who is an amazing character.
So awesome.
She is a Grey Londoner, so she can't use magic. But she comes across Kel, and we're not going to spoil any part of the story. We're just giving you a little bit of setup. And if you've seen it, you already know this. But she finds this affinity for magic, and she feels out of place in Grey London. But she's unable to travel between any of the Londons. She's stuck in a magicless world with this spirit that longs for magic and needs magic and can use it and interact with this character of magic.
Yeah. And she's a street rat. You know, she's a tough, street living kind of thug.
Yeah.
Like
when
she
is definitely a thug.
when we meet her, the first time you meet her, she robs people. Like that's her character. And so I see kind of a similarity between her and Vin in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series. Untrusting, grew up on the streets, kind of reserved, off-putting. And the growth you see in Vin and the growth you see here in Delilah Bard is vastly different.
Oh yeah.
And I love that Victoria Schwab doesn't just follow the normal path. She takes it her own route, and it's very well done.
Definitely. And one thing that I really love throughout these stories that I've been paying attention to more since I'm reading it again through Audible is it seems like Kel is given all of the freedom to travel between the Londons and to use the magic. But yet he is trapped to the royal family and to his duty and to his role in that society. Well, Delilah Bard has no freedom to travel to the different Londons, but seems more free because she isn't enslaved to anything. And you see this contrast, and you see both of them interact with some polar opposites that they see in each other's lives. And Kel is constantly longing for freedom and to figure out who he is. And you see that paralleled in Lila, where she's trying to figure out, where did I come from? Who am I? What is my purpose in life? What is this thing within me that comes alive when I interact with magic? And how do I do this in a way that isn't always selfish? Which is super. I mean, this is why I love Nerdum. There's so much depth. And V. Schwab does such a great job of highlighting things that exist in our own lives in a world that's different enough where we don't recognize it at first.
But similar enough that we don't feel completely lost.
Totally. And then we come to the end of the book and we think about it a little bit more and we're like, yeah, in a lot of the roles that I take in life, I kind of feel like Kel, where I have this duty, but I also just want to be me. I don't want to have to live up to that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot in our generation. My wife listens to another podcast that I'm a big fan of. Oh man, I totally lost the name. It's by Joy Clarkson. She's in her PhD in Oxford. We grew up.
It's flashing under here, so
yeah, you'll see it on screen. We'll leave it in the comments on our website. But she talked about how our generation is actually more interested in having children than our parents' generation, but we are less able.
Oh.
So as much as I hear people say, "Oh, I'm never going to have kids," what studies are showing is that the number of people who want kids younger than 30 is significantly higher than it was 40 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And some of that we want what we can't have.
I think maybe, but I think it's a sense of feeling trapped in our jobs, trapped in our responsibilities, school maybe. So all these things we feel pretty stuck.
Yeah.
And so we don't have a way to get out and to have that family we want, or to have whatever we want, travel, the dream job.
Yeah.
And so we do feel stuck. And that's what I think people use nerddom for. And why maybe it's growing in popularity. I need the escape of 2 or 3 Marvel movies a year because I'm at a dead-end job that I don't like.
Yeah.
And I can't seem to get a relationship to work out well and what have you that's making us feel stuck, so we escape vicariously.
I'm stuck in Grey London, so I'm going to imagine the red and white and black Londons.
Yes.
So that I can so that things in the real world can make me imagine something bigger, different, or greater, or whatever. And I think that's true. Like, and it goes to the whole title of our podcast of praying for superpowers. We're longing for something greater than what we have because, in a lot of ways, our lives right now aren't satisfying our needs.
Yeah.
And that's a hard anxiety to live with.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work to come to a point where you are satisfied in the way things are right now, especially with the 24/7 news cycles that we have, where we're constantly reminded of all the brokenness and the travesty of our world today.
Yeah.
That it's really nice to be able to think about a world that has different problems that seem manageable.
Like we talked about in our monsters episode.
Right.
Giving form to the unknown or the evil so that it can be defeated.
Yeah.
Dragons exist not so that we know they exist. They exist so that we know they can be defeated, is the quote our guest Adam Smith said. And I think that it really is the same thing. We create these worlds to escape because we feel like we need to succeed in something.
Yeah. And I think this series of A Darker Shade of Magic does a good job of giving us an anchor point of Grey London. Where it's like, yeah, I know that world. That's the world I live in. And then as Delilah Bard escapes that world, we then get to escape that world as well. And so it's this really interesting place where, especially in the first book, you start off and things are normal a little bit. You know, Kel starts off and it's very magical and very cool. And then you get Lila, and then she gets introduced to this new world, and then you're just drawn into this other world so much easier because you started somewhere you understood.
Right, and you're kind of following her emotionally.
Yeah.
Not just through the story, but you're like, yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I would feel, sucked into a new world, amazed, confused, excited, and worried all at the same time.
One thing that I really, really love about this book, and I hate about a lot of other shows, is think about like Pirates of the Caribbean. Remember the scene where she has to cut her hand in order to get blood onto the coins.
Right.
And the way she does that, and the way so many people do that, is they cut their palm. And I think that is the dumbest decision because...
To be fair, it's Barbossa that cuts her hand.
Okay.
Correct. Often people will cut their hand or cut their fingers to bleed.
And what happens is now you have a hand that's injured and you can't use it as well. Whereas Kel, he does cut his palm because in order to use Antare magic, you have to have Antare blood. And so he draws in his own blood. It's really grotesque, but really interesting as well. Mm-hmm. But he cuts the back of his forearm, which I've told my wife constantly and during different shows, like, that is the place you should be cutting to get blood. You may have to dig a little bit deeper to get as much blood, but at least you're not like handicapped.
Yeah, you now like if you go to throw a punch and like you squeeze your fist and there's a cut there, you're not going to be able to hit with any power. No. You're not going to be able to hold a knife or a sword or a gun or whatever. And so injuring your forearm, probably the best move.
Right. Yeah. And it's a small little thing in this book that I appreciated a whole ton.
I agree. It's kind of one of those things, like a nugget, I feel like, where you find it and you're like, I'm so glad that's in here because I didn't realize how much it bugged me.
Right.
So yeah.
It's like in stories, like I think The Wheel of Time does it a little bit, where they talk about like characters needing to use the facilities. And it's like, yeah.
I don't hear about that in other stories.
Right.
They're normal people.
There's not one point in the Star Trek series where somebody uses the restroom.
Oh, man.
And they explain away economy because apparently you just don't need an economy once you get to a certain point of enlightenment.
Right.
But does that same thing happen? Like if I get enlightened enough, do I no longer need to pee?
You sustain off of the energy of the universe like the Dragon Warrior in Kung Fu Panda.
Even if I eat?
Well, you don't need to.
But what if I do?
The energy of the universe absorbs the nutrients and takes it back out into the universe.
Oh man, we've gotten a little bit sidetracked.
That's okay. I kind of want to hit again on this different worlds thing.
Yeah.
Different Londons, which I love. It makes me think of C.S. Lewis, and you actually, I don't know if you meant to, but you kind of quoted him earlier. You said,
"Oh yeah,
if I cannot find meaning in this world, then I must have been born for another world.
Yeah.
My heart longs for something greater. And so C.S. Lewis, of course, was a great theologian, but he's most well known for his Chronicles of Narnia, and also his space trilogy is pretty well known. But the Chronicles of Narnia is all about going from London,
Yep.
where C.S. Lewis was from, or the countryside of England, to another world. Now, they never travel to another London, but it's in all the stories, these kids are experiencing something hard, whether it's someone in the family has died or is sick, or there's a war going on, or what have you, this difficult situation. They're drawn into this new world. Delilah Bard is homeless and a street rat, so she's drawn into a new world, kind of escaping that. Kel is stuck in his family,
Yep.
as you said earlier, and he is drawn into all the worlds because he has to.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see how Victoria Schwab, V.E. Schwab, plays that differently.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see. Instead of being stuck in one world, he's stuck in 4.
Right. And he's more imprisoned than Lila, who can't travel between the different Londons. And it's really interesting about halfway through the book when Kel becomes even more imprisoned to his brother Rye. And now his life is tied to his brother.
Yeah.
And
we
so
won't spoil
there is
it.
no escape. But it is, I think the concept of freedom and identity is really explored in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And again, is really satisfying because you're getting to explore both the really cool aspects of Antari magic that is has the awesome factor.
Yeah.
Very cool. And a very hard magic system, which I really like, very limited, which is also something that I like.
A lot of authors of fantasy will say you need a limited magic system. If you start out without limits, it's going to get to the point where it's not even believable in your own world.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love that it's he has to injure himself to use this magic.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Right. And even though he heals quickly as an Antari, it doesn't negate the fact that
he's cutting himself.
He's hurt, wounding, and feeling the pain of that. And he's only got a limited amount of magic and blood, and the two are very parallel. There's a lot of comparisons made between magic and blood, that magic doesn't live ethereally like the Force. It lives within the blood of a person and in the earth of the world.
Or in the river in Red London. There's different sources of magic, but the human body is always, not always, because not everyone can do magic, is often a source of power.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting in these books that the magic system is limited, but so is the geography. We go between 4 different worlds, but we never leave London, and if we do, it's only by a couple miles.
Yeah. By boat.
Right.
We never land on another land, really.
No.
Which is great. It's very contained.
Yeah.
For how big the world is. Oh man, yeah. Personal favorite thing about this series is Kel has a magic coat.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite things. So he pulls the coat off and turns it inside out, and it changes into a new coat. It's a different coat. And so he has the standard for 3 coats, one for each London. White, gray, and red.
And one that is just there because he likes it.
Right, and then he has his favorite. But he says sometimes he'll just find a random coat. So if he turns it inside out one way and then the other way again, it could be a new coat. And so he said one time I found a green half cape, but I don't know where it went to. And it's to me, that's hilarious. It's such a small detail, and it's such a big detail at the same time, because it's unexplained. And it's explained. It's very interesting to me.
Very. And it adds to the whole magic as a character, because it's a magic code. It's owned by magic. Kel talks to magic as if it is a partner, and even though he gives commands, he's very respectful of this living entity.
Yeah.
And so the coat kind of acts a little bit like a TARDIS for him.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't always give him what he wants, but it always gives him what he needs.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Lila is interacting with the coat and turning it inside out, and she thinks nothing of it because that's just who she is. And as she pulls through it, she finds a salve that Kel needs at that time. And so you see this interaction of the coat knows what needs to happen.
Right, and things will disappear from pockets
Right.
and show up in other pockets later, like the salve. He's like, I lost that, and I thought I'd lost it. And the coat was waiting until it was needed. And it just, things like that.
Yeah.
I love that Delilah Bard, she doesn't let Kel like pay off of his, or like pay off her debts.
Yeah.
She's very much like independent. And so like, I mean, she steals from him,
Right.
but he can't be generous,
Right.
which is hilarious to me.
And she's such a strong female character that does a good job of finding balance, because I think sometimes we can sway back and forth between a strong female lead
It's
who
really
is completely independent.
Right. Or a strong female lead who you might as well have made a man, because
Right.
there's not a difference.
Right.
And she does a great job of hitting that sweet spot.
Totally, because she is Delilah Bard and she doesn't need to be anything else. And I think that is a message that we need to hear more often in our own lives and through the books that we're reading, that you as you are is good enough. And we don't hear that often. And that doesn't mean you can't grow, right, or you shouldn't try to grow. But that acceptance of self and knowing I as Kel am okay, even though all of these things are going on around me, I can be at peace within myself, which we see a struggle for, of where do I belong? What is my purpose? And how do I match everything up in my life?
And we see another example of that in his brother Rai, Prince Rai, who's the elder. So he's set to inherit the kingdom one day. And we see it, he goes kind of from being the party prince, who's beloved by the people, and he kind of transforms throughout the books, being who he needs to be. But we still see him be who he wants to be.
Yeah.
And the beautiful kind of combination of the need and the want in his life, for me, is the best picture in the trilogy, where he's I need to do this. This needs to be my character. Not character like story character, but like personal character. Yeah. But this is who I am, and so I'm going to make them work together.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us in our societies are like, I need to be that, and we kind of push away the nerdy side of us.
Yeah.
Not specifically the nerdy side of us, but a part of us that we don't feel like is helpful. But the problem is that's you. So pushing away yourself, not going to do you any good.
Yeah. So we hope that you reflect on this, and we hope that you recognize that you are enough just the way you are. And we are so thankful for you in this season of Thanksgiving, that you have joined us in these conversations, and for your support. And we hope that you have a wonderful holiday.
Final thing. We wanted to do a Thanksgiving themed episode. Couldn't really think of one. So just as our final send-off, when you're with family or friends, or if you're unfortunate enough to not be with anyone this Thanksgiving, sit down and watch Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving, The Great Pumpkin, because it's themed and because it's beautiful and fun.
And it is literally the only Thanksgiving movie I can think of
that doesn't have to do with settlers wrecking the Native Americans.
Fair enough. If you think of one,
let
shout
us
it out
know.
to us. We'd love to hear. We'll catch you next time.